The topic for today's class lecture is Exercise Book by Rabindranath Tagore. This is a short story based on gender inequality. Now, the exercise book, the theme of the story is, of course, education of the female, education of women, gender equality when it comes to education. Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, as we already know, is one of the greatest literary figures to have come from India, and he is one of the pioneers of 19th century Bengal Renaissance. Bengal Renaissance was the golden age of learning amongst the Bengali elite in the 19th century. And Rabindranath Tagore, coming from an illustrious family, was a part and parcel of this Bengal Renaissance. Along with being a stalwart of literary figure, he was also deeply dedicated to the cause of women's education. So, as already mentioned, the exercise book is the story about education of a girl child, how a young girl was deprived of education in the 19th century Bengal, although she belonged to a very rich family. Now, the main characters of the story, the main protagonist is a young girl of around 12 years of age, and her name is Uma. Then there is her brother Govindalal, Jassi or Jashoda, her friend, Pyare Mohan, her husband. So, what happens in the story is, when the story opens, the narrator tells us that Uma is a little girl who is very curious when it comes to writing. She writes all over the walls of her house in her childish innocence and enthusiasm. And one day she makes the mistake of writing in her elder brother Govindalal's exercise book, notebook. Now, Govindalal himself was a writer who was very keen when it came to education. But of course, the irony of the situation was, although being an aspiring literary figure, Govindalal did not encourage his sister's education. Nevertheless, he is extremely angry when he comes home in the evening and sees something childish being scribbled on his famous literary work. He scolds his younger sister Uma, beats her up. But after a few days, since he is the elder brother, he feels bad for what he did to his sister out of anger. And in order to make up for the scolding that he gave her and all the beatings, he gifts her an exercise book. So the title of the story, the exercise book comes from this copy, as we know. So she is given a copy to write whatever she feels like. So Uma is very happy. She writes whatever comes to her mind. She loves writing. So that way her imagination is being nurtured, as it is young child have a very rich, young children have very rich imagination. So she is no different. She is very enthusiastic when it comes to reading, writing. But unfortunately, what happens is, due to the traditions of the time, Uma is supposed to be married off at a very young age, as that was the practice of the time. And you already know, if you look at the history of Bengal Renaissance, stalwarts, great figures, social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy strictly opposed the concept of child marriage. Especially it happened in a case of a young girl of 12-13 years getting married to a much older man of around 20-21 plus age. So she was, of course, everybody bowed down to the tradition, and Uma was married off to Pari Mohan. Now, as a little